Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. I have an awesome Omega for you guys to review. A little bit about the brand. They were founded back in 1848. They are Swiss-made in origin and now are part of the Swatch Group's luxury tier. Although Omega and Tissot merging was actually a precursor to what would eventually come to be known as the Swatch Group, so I would say their history is a touch more pure than some of the other brands within the group, where they were pretty much rescued by the Swatch Group. They helped found the actual group, so hey, you know what, Omega will get a pass here. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this, and I think everyone would consider it, a dive watch. Some key characteristics and design when you're looking for a diver: of course, you're going to want water resistance to some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. This is the Seamaster Diver 300 meters 007 edition, and it is actually identical to James Bond's watch in No Time to Die. This 42mm Seamaster is strong yet light. In terms of the watch case, that is actually made out of grade 2 titanium. It also sports a really cool tropical aluminum bezel insert and dial, so that look has definitely more of a kind of brown patinaed off gray tone to it, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic, especially paired to that nice darker tone from grade 2 titanium. One thing to mention about grade 2 titanium, although it's not as hard as grade 5, it is actually more pure. So in terms of the alloy itself, it's going to be more pure titanium, so it's going to have some more of that character there. A big shout out to Belmont Watches in San Diego for lending this piece in so that I can share it with you guys and that I could get hands-on with it, because I have to say, ever since No Time to Die came out, this is one that I was really interested to see, because I really like the crossover in terms of the fact that it is, of course, a Bond movie watch, but also has this great kind of military issue vibe to it. Like, I definitely dig that modern Milsub vibe that I'm getting from it. And of course, it does sport the broad arrow markings, which I think is fun. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, another huge shout out to Belmont Watches in San Diego for supporting the channel and of course providing this piece in. Now let's take a look. Look at that color. I think in a lot of the pictures you can't necessarily tell the level of the brown that's here in terms of the warmth, and I'm hoping the camera can really pick that up, guys, especially against this black background. I think it is absolutely stunning. And I have to say, I'm very, very taken by it, especially with that nicely done crystal, guys. It just gives you all the vibes in terms of that just kind of old school aesthetic, but still very much no nonsense, no date, and no 007 gimmicks, which I think is great that they toned things down and really just focused on providing a really cool watch. Of course, one that's very different because they put it on the mesh here, and this is just such a cool thing, and it really brings to life those lyre lugs. The twisted lugs look absolutely fantastic, and they really stand out and pop when you do have it on a two-piece strap. Of course, here you're going to be getting the same benefits of having a bracelet, thanks to the material, of course, being metal, and in this case titanium. Now, in terms of the dimensions, 42mm in diameter, 13mm thick, and that is including that nice high domed crystal there, which is double domed, so as you can see, really only going to get harsh distortions at the very ends and whatnot. You're not going to be getting those over the center lines of the dial. So very, very cool. 49.4mm lug to lug, which is on the longer side, but I will say the shape of these, the way that they taper, the way that they twist, the way that they turn, it really does help the watch wear much smaller, especially with the way that they did this dial, where they really brought your eye towards the center. They have everything pushed in, and then of course they're rather large indices, so I think that this wears really, really fantastic. Now, in terms of some of the other details here, guys, 120 click bezel, unidirectional, very easy to turn, quite clicky. I think it's a nice balance. I think some people might not be crazy about this, but I mean, it's a titanium bezel, so it's not going to feel like a steel bezel. So there's a certain level of lightness that's here, but it doesn't feel tinny, which I can appreciate. So they definitely did a little extra there to make sure that this works, but at the same time, you wouldn't want the resistance to be too strong, because when you look at, of course, this very signature scalloped bezel edge there, it's not like you have a ton of grip, right? It's not like it's a coin edge or something like that. So it is going to have to be softer just so you're able to set it. But I have to say, I don't find it sloppy, at least not in this particular unit. You know, I think other reviewers might not feel the same way. For me, I think it's perfectly serviceable, and it actually feels quite smooth. So I dig that. Now, you're going to have, of course, the twin crowns, one screw down crown at 3 o'clock, and then you're also going to have the manual helium escape valve at 10 o'clock. So very nice. In terms of the movement, although you can't see it, it's Omega's automatic 8806 movement, and it is very good, guys. It's a master chronometer, which means it's META certified for 0 to +6 seconds a day, guys. 0. So there's no losing time at all. So that's just a higher level, and that's not even all of what Metis does. They also do some testing in terms of the ratings for the water and everything like that, which I don't think anybody's ever really been worried about in terms of Seamasters, but it's something to mention because they do pay extra, you know, to a third party for that. The one drawback, guys, and this is going to be one that's going to be common with pretty much all modern Omegas, at least the ones that are using the in-house calibers, is going to be that 3.5 hertz sweep. So instead of a 4 hertz sweep with 28,800 vibrations per hour, this is going to be a 3.5 hertz sweep with 25,200 vibrations per hour. It does manage to have a 55-hour power reserve, which is great, and it's also anti-magnetic to 15,000 Gauss, which is very, very capable. Now, in terms of the case back, it is not a display back. It is a really subtle, toned down, you know, screw in case back, and it just has a nice, again, it's subtle, it's clean, and it doesn't feel gimmicky. So I like that. And of course, it's titanium, so in terms of it feeling good on the back of your wrist, it is very hypoallergenic, and it's going to wear quite well. Now, getting into the details here, guys, that matte tropical dial is beautiful, wonderfully balanced with no date, of course, so it's going to be very symmetrical. You're getting applied indices. You're also getting two-tone lume, so the bezel pip will be green, and the minute hand will also have some green, and then everywhere else is actually going to be blue. And when I say everywhere else, I really mean that, because it actually has a lumed bezel insert. It is an aluminum bezel insert, but it is coated really, really beautifully. And I think we've seen more and more that, you know, in terms of specs, there's the spec, and then there's also the execution. And in this case, the best execution for them to get that match, to get everything to come together, was to do a coated aluminum bezel insert. So it's not like they did it to save money. They did it because it ultimately led to the more beautiful aesthetic. So I have no problem with that. 20 millimeter lugs, so very nice. And then you're getting this nice titanium mesh bracelet with a signed push button fold over clasp. So very, very clean. And of course, you just pop this little flipper up, and then you have that engage with the holes on this side. So very clean, but let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Ooh, okay, guys, check it out on my 7.5 inch wrist. Now, although my wrist is slightly on the larger than average size at 7.5 inches, you can also see that it's quite a tall and round wrist. So it's not like it's just super flat and accommodating, but you guys can see this thing wears beautifully, and it also feels fantastic, obviously, because it is titanium. So, it feels really good, and it doesn't feel strange. I've definitely had some titanium watches that felt a bit too light, almost hollow and wooden. This still has a nice amount of heft, so I dig that, guys, and it just wears really fantastic. And I know some of you are thinking, well, 42 millimeters, like, I'm not into the guys. This wears really, really well. All right, like, it works out, and I love the Seamaster. I mean, I'm more of a neo vintage Seamaster guy myself. I have a beautiful electric blue blue big triangle that I just can't get enough of. But I will say I look at this, especially on the mesh, and it makes me want to kind of see what I can do to kind of recreate something like this, maybe on the neo vintage side, something from the early 2000s. I have a couple of ideas and references that I think would look really, really cool on mesh. But I have to say, this is just a really clean watch. And again, I'm not huge on Fotina, but there's something about this execution of it. It's not necessarily to look aged. I think it's just something, right? Like the idea is, oh yeah, well, brown dial, tropical lume, everything's aged. And I think that's just a little bit too high level. I think if you look at that and you look at this with the choice of titanium, I think these colors actually just have a certain level of flow to them. And I think it just works. Absolutely. Would I love to see this, something like this with something a little bit more standard with crispy lume? We've seen that, right? The actually Bond 60th anniversary, the blue dial with the 60-minute marker there at 12 o'clock, which was very interesting, and with a wave dial. So they've done stuff like that. So if you do want something that feels a little bit more modern, more contemporary, you have that option. But there's something about this that just feels very warm, and it just feels very, very versatile because of that. And of course, yeah, my wrist being close to the camera lens made it look a little bit larger. But if I keep my wrist nice and low here, and just tighten up the frame, you guys can see that it sits really, really nice, guys, at just under 50 millimeters lug to lug, 49.4, but it wears it really, really well, especially when you think about that mesh bracelet and the way that it swings, and it doesn't jut out or anything like that, elongating that ultimate lug to lug. So this is just a looker, guys. Check it out. Ooh. Oh man, this is a good looking watch. And it, of course, the bracelet, you guys might also notice that it even has a slight taper to that, which is really cool. So it tapers down from 20 millimeters down to about 17.5 millimeters, where you get to that signature Omega deployant style clasp. And it just is very tidy, very, very handsome. My goodness, this thing looks good. So with that said, let's actually get it off wrist, set up for some lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Check that out. Just fantastic, guys. It performs, it blasts, my goodness. And you even mentioned managed to fit in some nice color play with that green on blue. And I think it looks really, really immaculate. Ultimately legible, guys. I mean, as much as I love the old stuff, I mean, these movements, in terms of just the advancements that they've made, in terms of accuracy above your standard chronometers into Metis standards, as well as just the fit and finish and the build quality is definitely, another level. Of course, I'm going to love my early 2000s Neo Vintage, but when it comes down to these types of shots, I really like to work in a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. And I have to say, some of you guys are in for a treat, because you might not have known that depending on the light, look at this thing looks quite modern. It almost looks white when it has kind of a day lume glow to it, and then the dial can look quite black, and versus the brown hues and the warmth that you get when you really, really get some light on it in that transitional lighting. Check that out. It almost has a modern flair, but you do get that nice pop of red, with the Seamaster script. So very, very cool, guys. I'm digging this one. Ooh, man. It didn't need to have lume this good, but it does. And I have to say that it even breaks from kind of your expectations. A lot of times you see Fotina, you think it's going to be just kind of a watered down lume. Here, the lume looks fantastic. Even the finishing here on the case, guys. I mean, it is titanium, and again, it is grade 2 titanium, so more of a pure titanium in terms of that alloy. But my gosh, it looks gorgeous. like the satinization on here, the sharpness, not sharp to the touch, but sharp to the eye in terms of the definition on those contours of the case. It is absolutely immaculate. So guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. This definitely wears like a 42. It's quite true to size, but I will say it doesn't feel oversized. And I know some 42s can feel a little big. This is not one of them. This feels like a right, proper, full-size dive watch. So it's also lightweight, but not insubstantial, which is great. So it has a really nice, well-balanced and sporty kind of wear profile. With just enough heft to remind you that you have something very special on your wrist. So I appreciate that. Now, in terms of model variants, you know, there's literally a sea of other Seamasters to choose from, but this one really manages to stand out, which I dig. It just feels like it has a different vibe to it. And, you know, I'm a big fan of the Daniel Craig, James Bond era. So yeah, I mean, that's always very cool to see this type of stuff, see that peeking out from underneath a cuff. Now, in terms of comparable models, guys, the Seamaster Professional has been the gold standard in terms of entry into luxury divers since Pierce Brosnan's Bond, and has only recently just been rivaled by the likes of Tudor divers within group movements, and now even Metis certified in group movements. So very, very cool. And, you know, if anything, Tudor should probably have the advantage in terms of bang per buck, considering that that's literally been their mission statement since they were made. Like they were never meant to be the best watch. They were meant to be the cheap variation of a watch that was more desirable. Whereas Omega is actually trying to be kind of the best that it can be. So I think that's something that really, although the price points can be quite similar, I think that's really one of the big differences between Omega and Tudor. Tudor is going to be, you know, a lower end variation of a Rolex, whereas Omega is really meant to be a rival for Rolex versus just an alternative, you know, especially one that is a cheaper alternative. So for me, guys, bottom line, the James Bond theme just feels distinctive while not being overwhelming. So I appreciate that. You know, there was nothing too over the top about the execution here and those callbacks. So movie fans and I think Milsub fans alike will really enjoy the more toned down and tactical take on the SMP. But let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. And don't forget, big shout out to Belmont Watches. I believe this piece is already sold, so I was in a hurry to film this, but I don't have to be in a hurry to edit it. So whenever this posts, you know, unfortunately the link in the description probably won't lead to this watch where you can buy it, but it will lead to Belmont Watches where you can check out whatever they have on hand, which typically is curated pretty darn well. So with that said, thanks guys. I'll see you in the next one.